All right, Space Cadets, strap yourselves in and get ready for a wild ride through the cosmos with your favorite celestial comedian, Bob, from Bob's Intriguing Facts. Today, we're diving headfirst into the wacky world of solar flares. And boy, do we have a doozy on the horizon, the 2025 Doomsday Solar Flare. Will Earth survive this interstellar tantrum? Will our smartphones still work? Or will we have to resort to carrier pigeons and smoke signals? Let's find out. Picture this. It's 2025, and you're just minding your own business, scrolling through your holographic social media feed, when suddenly your device starts glitching out like a disco ball on steroids. The lights flicker. Your smart toaster starts burning images of solar flares onto your bread, and the sky is putting on a light show that would make Pink Floyd jealous. Congratulations, you might be experiencing the aftermath of a massive solar flare. But wait, what exactly are these cosmic temper tantrums we call solar flares? Well, buckle up, because we're about to embark on a journey to the center of the sun. Figuratively speaking, of course. Please don't try this at home. Solar flares are like the sun's way of saying, hey, look at me. These explosive outbursts occur when the sun's magnetic field gets more tangled up than your earbuds after a marathon session in your pocket. The magnetic field lines twist and turn until they snap like cosmic rubber bands, releasing a tremendous amount of energy that would make even the Hulk green with envy. Solar flares are classified into different categories based on their strength and the intensity of the X-rays they emit. The weakest flares are Class A, followed by B, C, M, and X. X-class flares are the most powerful and can cause the most damage to our technology and infrastructure. Imagine the sun as a giant cosmic microwave, and the solar flares are like popcorn kernels that get super excited and start popping uncontrollably. Except instead of delicious, buttery popcorn, we get bombarded with high-energy particles and radiation. Yum. When a solar flare erupts, it sends a barrage of charged particles and electromagnetic radiation hurtling towards Earth at breakneck speeds. Most of the time, Earth's magnetic field acts as a protective shield, deflecting these particles and preventing them from causing too much damage. However, when a particularly strong solar flare occurs, like the one predicted for 2025, the particles can penetrate our magnetic field and wreak havoc on our technology. And that brings us to the star of our show, pun intended, the 2025 Doomsday Solar Flare. Scientists have been keeping a close eye on the sun's activity, and they've noticed a pattern. The sun goes through cycles, known as solar cycles, which last about 11 years. During the peak of these cycles, called the solar maximum, the sun's magnetic field becomes more chaotic, leading to an increase in solar flares and other solar events. Now, before we get too carried away with the doom and gloom, it's important to note that the 2025 Doomsday Solar Flare is purely speculative at this point. While some experts believe that the next solar maximum, predicted to occur around 2025, could be particularly intense, there is no concrete evidence to suggest that a massive, earth-shattering solar flare is a certainty. So, while it's important to be prepared for the possibility, there's no need to start stockpiling canned goods and building a bunker just yet. If you think this sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, think again. In 1859, a massive solar flare known as the Carrington event caused telegraph systems worldwide to go haywire. Sparks flew from telegraph machines, shocking operators and setting paper on fire. The northern lights, usually only visible near the poles, were seen as far south as Cuba and Hawaii. If a similar event were to occur today, it could cause trillions of dollars in damage and take months or even years to recover from. Now, before you start stockpiling canned goods and building a doomsday bunker that we talked about earlier in your backyard, take a deep breath. While the threat of a massive solar flare is real, it's not quite time to panic yet. Scientists and engineers are working hard to develop technologies that can protect our power grids and satellites from the effects of solar flares. And besides, if a solar flare does cause a global blackout, think of all the quality time you'll get to spend with your family playing board games by candlelight. But why should we be concerned about solar flares? After all, the sun has been throwing its cosmic temper tantrums for billions of years, and Earth is still standing. Well, the problem is that our modern world is heavily dependent on technology, and a massive solar flare could cause widespread disruptions to our way of life. One area that could be particularly affected by a solar flare is air travel. Modern airplanes rely heavily on GPS and other electronic systems for navigation and communication. If a solar flare were to knock out these systems, pilots would be forced to rely on more primitive methods of navigation, like using the stars or following highways. This could lead to massive delays and cancellations, stranding passengers and disrupting global travel. Imagine trying to play a game of Simon Says, but instead of Simon giving you instructions, it's a toddler who just drank a gallon of fruit punch. That's kind of what it would be like for pilots trying to navigate during a solar flare. The instructions coming from their instruments would be erratic and unpredictable, making it nearly impossible to fly safely. In fact, we've already seen the effects of solar flares on air travel. In 2015, during a period of increased solar activity, several airlines rerouted flights that were scheduled to pass over the North Pole. The concern was that the solar flares could disrupt the plane's communication and navigation systems, putting passengers and crew at risk. While no major incidents occurred, it was a sobering reminder of the power of solar flares. But air travel is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the potential impacts of a massive solar flare. Our entire modern world is built on the foundation of technology, from the power grids that keep the lights on to the satellites that enable global communication. A solar flare could cause this house of cards to come crashing down, leaving us in the dark and unable to connect with each other. Imagine trying to post a selfie on Instagram during a solar flare-induced blackout. You might have to resort to drawing a picture of yourself on a cave wall and hoping someone comes by to give it a like. Hashtag Stone Age social media. So, how can we prepare for the potential impact of a massive solar flare? The first step is to understand how solar flares work and what triggers them. That's where our trusty solar scientists come in, armed with their high-tech telescopes and complex computer models. Predicting solar flares is a bit like trying to predict the mood swings of a hormonal teenager. You might be able to see some warning signs, like a sudden obsession with dark eyeliner or a tendency to slam doors, but you can never be entirely sure when the next outburst will occur. Solar scientists have to look for similar warning signs on the sun, like the appearance of sunspots or changes in the sun's magnetic field. One of the most mind-blowing aspects of solar flares is the fact that they can trigger massive waves of plasma on the sun's surface known as solar tsunamis. These tsunamis can reach heights of up to 100,000 kilometers, or over 60,000 miles, making them taller than Mount Everest and the Empire State Building stacked on top of each other, times 1,000. They race across the sun's surface at speeds of up to 250 kilometers per second, or over 150 miles per second, making them some of the fastest moving objects in our solar system. But even with all of our scientific knowledge and predictive capabilities, the reality is that we can never be entirely sure when or where the next massive solar flare will strike. So what do we do if the 2025 doomsday solar flare does hit us with the force of a cosmic wrecking ball? Recovering from a massive solar flare would be like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle the size of a football field, with half the pieces missing and the other half on fire. It would require a massive coordinated effort from governments, scientists, engineers, and everyday citizens to rebuild our technological infrastructure and get our world back up and running. The long-term consequences of a massive solar flare could be far-reaching and difficult to predict. We might see a resurgence in analog technologies, like landlines and printed books, as people seek out more reliable forms of communication and information sharing. We might also see a shift in the way we design and build our technological systems, with a greater emphasis on resilience and redundancy. Tinfoil hats might become the must-have accessory of the post-solar flare world, as people seek to protect their brains from the cosmic radiation. Hey, if you can't beat them, join them, right? So what can we do to prepare for the potential impact of a massive solar flare? While we may not be able to prevent a solar flare from occurring, there are steps we can take to mitigate its effects and reduce the risk of catastrophic damage. One of the most important things we can do is to protect our electronic devices and critical infrastructure from the effects of solar flares. This can involve everything from using surge protectors and backup power systems to designing more resilient electronic components that can withstand the electromagnetic radiation and charged particles that solar flares can produce. Preparing for a solar flare is a bit like planning a surprise party for a friend who hates surprises. You know it's going to happen eventually, but you're not exactly sure when, and you want to make sure everything is in place when the big moment arrives. In the case of solar flares, this means having backup plans and redundant systems in place to keep our critical infrastructure running even if the primary systems fail. And hey, if all else fails, we can always fall back on the tried and true method of sacrificing a rubber chicken to the sun gods and hoping for the best. It might not be scientifically proven, but it can't hurt, right? Another important step we can take is to reinforce our infrastructure to make it more resilient to the effects of solar flares. This can involve everything from burying power lines underground, protecting them from electromagnetic surges, to designing satellites and spacecraft with extra shielding to protect them from charged particles. Let's take Sweden, for example. The government has been working to bury more of the country's power lines underground in order to protect them from the effects of solar flares and other space weather events. This is part of a larger effort to create a more resilient and secure power grid that can withstand the challenges of the 21st century. Ultimately, the key to surviving the potential impact of a massive solar flare is preparation and prevention. By investing in research and development, strengthening our infrastructure, and educating the public about the risks and potential consequences of a solar flare, we can reduce the risk of catastrophic damage and ensure that our world can continue to thrive even in the face of cosmic chaos. The 2025 doomsday solar flare may sound like something out of a science fiction movie, but it's a very real possibility that we need to take seriously. While there is no concrete evidence to suggest a massive solar flare is a certainty in 2025, it is important to be prepared for the possibility. By understanding the science behind solar flares, preparing our technology and infrastructure, and working together as a global community, we can face this cosmic challenge head-on and emerge stronger and more resilient than ever before. So, my fellow space cadets, if you've enjoyed this wild ride through the world of solar flares, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Bob's Intriguing Facts for more mind-blowing space content. And remember, if the 2025 doomsday solar flare does hit, You can always count on us to be there with you, cracking jokes and sharing survival tips. Stay curious, stay prepared, and always keep looking up. Until next time, keep your tinfoil hat shiny and your cosmic sense of humor intact. Bob out.